This podcast is brought to you by Sideline Productions, who provide national, regional, and local events with large modular LED displays, as well as live production services. Visit them at sideline-productions.com. And by Skipping Stone Studios, storytellers from Brookings, South Dakota, providing businesses, organizations, and nonprofits with video, post-production, and photography. Bring your story to life and visit them at skippingstonestudios.com. Welcome to the Brookings, South Dakota 1 Million Cups podcast. We would like to thank you all for tuning in. We have this podcast for those of you who can't make it, but we would like everyone to know 1 Million Cups is held at 9 a.m. every Wednesday at the Children's Museum of South Dakota. This week, we have a 30-plus year veteran of the business world talking to us about starting a nonprofit. Craig Pahl is here to discuss bringing global group Alpha into South Dakota. Craig has years of experience of being part of major brands, and he's trying to incorporate all that knowledge into his new venture. Everyone grab a cup of coffee and enjoy. Here's Craig.
Thank you. Well, hello, 1 Million Cups. How are you doing? Oh, come on. I've been told my voice gets a little bit soft, so I've been told I have to put my big boy voice on. So those of you in the back, if I get a little soft, can you raise your hand for me a little bit? Kind of let me know what's going on. Now, a lot of you may not know anything about Alpha, but we always try to do something fun at every Alpha event. So I'm going to play a song for you, and the first one who guesses what movie that song is a soundtrack of will get a prize. Okay? So Randy. It's a new movie. Oh, come on. Guardians of the Galaxy, all right. Thanks, Randy. That's one of my favorite movies. My wife just gives it a pass, but you know what your prize is? A free cup of coffee. Hey, so really good. You know, Scott, I really appreciate this time to kind of talk with this group about my journey. I decided in June of this last year to set up a Christian nonprofit and try to run it like a business and try to use some of the new e-marketing tools that are available to kind of make that thing work. And so what I'm going to share with you today a little bit is some of the things I've gone through, some of the questions I've had in my mind, and as Scott mentioned at the end of this, I'm really looking for feedback on things that I can do better or other things that I may have missed. And so that's really what I love about Million Cups, is that community and that dialogue that we can have here. So why don't we go ahead and get started. Now I'm going to use some notes so I don't miss some things. This is really my first attempt at sharing my story with anyone, so I'm kind of trying to keep myself guided here a little bit. So to give you a little bit of my background, I'm a 30-plus year businessman. Just retired from 3M, and 3M was my fourth company that I actually worked for. I'm a 10-year Christian, and I'm the first regional director for Alpha USA in South Dakota. That's the Christian nonprofit that I'm starting up. And so Alpha USA is a nonprofit, and it's part of an international nonprofit called Alpha International. And Alpha International really started in England, and it's currently thank you, Scott. It's currently being run in 169 countries by 127 different denominations. Now you've got some flyers on your table that kind of give you some of those kind of details. In the United States, Alpha is being used by churches in all 50 states, but in South Dakota, less than 1% of the churches are actually using this tool as part of an outreach to the community and specifically to younger adults. Now, the Alpha tool is actually really an idea, a story, and a tool. The idea of Alpha is that you should be able to create a space between the culture and the church where people can ask their real important questions about life and about faith without pressure or without judgment. So that's the idea of Alpha. Okay? The story of Alpha is that it works, because it works in all 169 countries, all denominations have run it. It works in libraries, it works in homes, it works at work. It's run in bars, it's run just about at every context that you can imagine. So it's one Alpha, many different contexts. And so then the individual stories of the people that have run through Alpha and have come to faith through Alpha, that's the sentences of the Alpha story, if you will. In 2012 in the United States, 50% of the people that attended an Alpha course either came to faith or recommitted themselves to faith, so it's an effective tool. Now, as a tool, Alpha is nothing more than a 10-week interactive course. And it's got 3 basic elements. Number 1, good food. It always starts out with good food, where people can sit around a table and have a great conversation about family, about friends, about fun, but nothing spiritual. Because at that point, then you developed a relationship. Then the second element of Alpha is that you have a talk, and that's either a video that we supply or you can do it live. And then the third element of Alpha is discussion time, or small group discussion time. That's where you break up and you just have an open discussion around what they saw and what questions you may have. There is no pressure, there is no judgment, there is nothing that says you have to believe this way. It's just saying, this is what we know, and what do you think? And what's key to this is the selection of hosts and helpers, because those are people that are not necessarily who have been Christian the longest or who good teachers are, but they're people that can put themselves in the background, facilitate conversation, and just make people feel at home. That's one of the key things for Alpha. Okay, my wife and I, Colleen, have been doing small groups for about 8 years. And we've been doing them both in the US and in China, where I first discovered Alpha. And when I was asked back in June of this last year if I wanted to be the regional director for Alpha in South Dakota, I really had 3 questions, really 3 concerns. You know, I had over 30 years experience as a businessman. You know, could I really maintain this new faith that I have and run this operation using the experiences that I have? So that was one question. How would I do that? You know, secondly, I'm 64 years old, going to be 65 in just a few months. Most of my background is in engineering, operations, and manufacturing. How do I deal with all this e-marketing stuff that's going on out there with Facebook and Twitter? And, you know, I mean, I barely know how to text, let alone anything else. So how do I do that? And then third, I'd only been a Christian for about 10 years, and most of the time I've been a Christian has not been in South Dakota. It's either been out of the state or out of the country. And so I don't really have an established network that I can lean on to help me with this nonprofit. Okay, thank you. You can see I fade real fast, I guess. So those are kind of some of the 3 concerns that first came to mind when I was asked to take on this role. Now, the first thing I did, like everybody does when they're starting up something, they start going to friends and start talking with them. You start reading an awful lot. And one of my first conclusions was that, I think that God was the first entrepreneur. I mean, he started with nothing and look what he created. And actually, if you read Genesis, he actually talks about taking the resources that he has provided us for sustenance and cultivation. So he's actually asking us to be creative because God is creative. And I can't think of anything more creative than starting a business. That's as good as it gets. So in a sense, I'm thinking that God is asking us all to be entrepreneurs in some way or another. So I kind of answered that first question for me. I think I have the guidance there to do that. About this time then, when I was being asked to take on this role, who walked into my life but that tall guy in the back over there? You met him this morning, Scott, and his company, 9 Clouds. And then all of a sudden I realized, well, here's how this old guy learns how to do Facebook, learns how to do Twitter, learns how to do all these other things and all the marketing concepts that most engineers don't really have a clue. Okay? So now as a result of that relationship, I've engaged 9 Clouds to help me with this process. We now have a web page, we have a Facebook page, I have a Twitter account. I'm using MailChimp as my emailing device that goes on out to all the different people that subscribe. And if you guys are interested, I've got a sign-up sheet up here, and you can subscribe to my monthly newsletter. And I'd love you to do that, and then you can give me some feedback. Now, one of the reasons I'm so excited about it here in Brookings is that this is the creative capital of South Dakota, and if God's asking me to be creative and start a business, what better place to start it than here? Okay? So the last thing that Scott is kind of asking me to do is to try and set up a blog. And so I'm considering that. But my problem is content. I mean, I don't know how to create content. I can draw pictures, I can design things, but the content that you need for this kind of thing requires a different skill set than I have. So we're considering bringing in guest bloggers to help us with the blog. But again, it comes back to I don't have an established network of people in the state to help me with that. And so that still continues to be a challenge. So for this Christian enterprise that I'm engaging on, we really have 2 basic goals. Number 1, we want to double every year for the next 3 years the number of churches or ministries in the state that are using Alpha. In 2014, there were 4 churches, less than 1%. 2015, so far we have 6, and we have 4 more churches that are considering to run Alpha. So it looks like I'm going to make my penetration goal for 2015 pretty easily. The second goal for this organization is to acquire funding to support a paid regional half-time person with expenses. That would take around $25,000 to $30,000 on an annual basis. Okay, thank you. And currently, I'm a volunteer. I'm paying my own expenses. I'm raising a little bit of funding to help with promotional materials and some of those kind of things. So far, through my emailing, I've been able to raise around $3,500. So that's the one gap that I really have, and it's a reflection, I think, of my lack of network and my lack of contact. So really the third concern that I expressed to you is that network. The only way I'm going to see if I can do it is to do it. And so that's what I'm attempting to do here, is to create a Christian enterprise here and become a Christian entrepreneur.
The first question we ask every speaker is what can the Brookings community do for you? Craig follows that with 3 questions from the audience. The first, he was asked how the community where Alpha started is similar to Brookings, followed by explaining how Alpha works with an organization. Craig has a strong business background, so he was asked what he sees nonprofits not doing that succeeded in the business world and how they could be applied to a nonprofit.
I think the number one thing that you can help me with is help me build a network. And you can do that by liking my Facebook page, liking my South Dakota Alpha USA Facebook page. Go find me on the web under Alpha USA South Dakota, and then just promote all of those things to all of your networks of people that you have available to you. Well, the church in London is Holy Trinity Brompton that the Alpha course came out of. It's a monster church, and London's a big city. So it's hard to compare, if you will, Brookings to London. However, the same idea around small groups, building relationships, building community that is all a part of Alpha can apply here as it's done in all the 169 different countries that it's been done with. I think what I really like about Brookings, and in particular it's reflected in A Million Cups, is this idea about building community. And I think that faith is an important part of any community, and the process of creating community is fundamental to both business and faith. You know, that's a good question. Thank you. Typically, what I do is I will provide a 1 or 2 day training class to a group that's been identified either in that ministry or in that church. And then we provide materials and other things available to them to help them run their course. A lot of what's going to happen is it will evolve over time because every church or every ministry has a little bit different context. Now, the FCA up on campus just ran their first Alpha course through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They had 20 athletes at it their first night, and it was really successful. Now, that's not a church. We're talking with the navigators. The navigators want to use Alpha because it has that cultural context to it. The part about Alpha is that we don't try to judge, we don't try to pressurize. All we do is present the facts and provide a venue for open and honest conversation. And so we're not asking you to believe one way or the other. You have to come to those conclusions by yourself. And so that's the process. So it's so much more than just a curriculum, if you will. It's a philosophy. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that because I mean the gaps for me first off were all the technology that is out there, and coming from a big company like I have like 3M, we had a lot of our own homegrown systems. And so now I'm migrating into something where I have to develop all of those using Facebook and Twitter and all of those things. And quite honestly, I'm used to systems that are pretty precise, pretty well defined, and I know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know what the outcome is going to be out of this Facebook page. So there's a lot more shades of gray that make it more difficult for me to operate because I want to succeed so bad that you almost come to the point where you don't want to take the next step because you're afraid to fail. And so I think that that's the biggest challenge for me going into this environment is making that transition in my own personality and my own. I used to think in 3M that I wasn't very risk averse. But as I've gone into this particular process, I'm finding out I'm way more risk averse than I ever thought I was.
Well, that's it for our show. Come back next week where we will have new speakers, new topics, and fresh brewed coffee. Have a good day, everyone.